Well, we're going to a roster of Big Five panelists and hitting up their expertises to further a couple of stories this morning. Here's the next example of that. Let's talk about Quebec's plan that they announced this week to freeze their approval of temporary foreign workers for quote-unquote low-wage jobs in Montreal. Applications suspended for 6 months starting on September 3rd for job offers with wages below $27.47 per hour. That number, of course, is Quebec's median hourly wage. The news has sparked debate across the province, many businesses making a plea for how critical these foreign workers are to their operations. Let's go to Neil Drabkin. Neil is an immigration lawyer, and he also served as a senior policy advisor to a former federal minister of immigration. Hi, Neil. Welcome back.
Good morning, Elias.
Who was that minister of immigration?
The Honorable Jerry Wiener.
Jerry Wiener. There you go.
In the Mulroney government.
So let's talk a bit here. What is your take on what the Quebec government announced this week?
I think it's a flagrant indictment on what we become as a society, because we clearly have a large labor shortage in this province. That's confirmed by the Chamber of Commerce, business groups, industry, and yet the government is freezing temporary foreign workers who earn under $57,000 a year, mainly because we can't house them. We can't provide medical services for them because there are not enough nurses. We can't teach their kids in school because we don't have enough teachers. So this is what we become as a society. It's unacceptable. We have an aging population, birth rate that's declining. We need these people in order to come take the jobs Canadians don't want to take, Quebecers don't want to take, and pay taxes to secure our services. I think this is more about the obsession that the CAQ government has with protecting the French language than it has about immigration and temporary foreign workers.
So let me just ask you on that front, right? Because I think there is some debate on whether or not all of these jobs are what you say, which is jobs that Quebecers simply won't do. You know, there's one concerned Canadian who just decided to take the publicly available data and they created a map. I don't know if you've been to this website, LMIA, because you have to have the labor market impact assessment, right? LMIA, yep. Map.ca. And they have mapped, it's across the entire country. You can click on Montreal or Toronto or any province and you can see just exactly the businesses that have applied. And I'll grant you, Neil, I see like examples, right, of, cooks. And I've heard from the restaurants, they can't find anyone to cook at 2 o'clock in the morning. They want to stay open up overnight. I see that. But then I see other jobs like administrative assistants and other categories where I say, really? There's no one in Canada that wants to do this. And I sort of want to split the difference here and say, no, it can't possibly all of these jobs, we need foreign workers for them.
Well, what cost are we willing to pay? This is, as you said, $27.47 an hour or so. There may be Canadians or Quebecers who want to take a job as an administrative assistant at $50 an hour, but very quickly those businesses are going to go out of business, or they'll pass on the cost to the consumer. So it's not practical economically for them to hire people at those higher wages. These are presumably jobs that Canadians or Quebecers don't want to accept at the rate they're being offered at. And the rate is not that low. It's under $57,000 a year. So it's a sizable salary. It's not an extraordinary salary, but notwithstanding. These are foreign workers who are prepared to come to this province, take these jobs, work hard, pay their taxes, and perhaps ultimately become immigrants. And that's good for our economy. Immigrants have built this province, this country, and will continue to do so well into the future.
So this is very interesting because, federally, right, there is a big debate on the number of people Canada is taking in through the various different programs, right? And, I know you're in the Pierre Poilievre conservative camp. I've heard Pierre Poilievre say of late, we're not going to accept we're not going to accept anyone over the number of homes that we have, right? Because we've seen housing shortages, we've seen that there's a tax happening right now on hospital services, education. Like there's just an impressive amount of demand, and Canada, in some respects, not keeping up to it. So I just would like your perspective there, because it certainly seems that there are some signals federally from Pierre Poilievre and others that we need to dial it back a bit. And this seems like an example of dialing it back from Quebec.
Pierre Poilievre stands for immigration. He understands just how important the rich contribution of immigrants has been to this country over all the years. However, we have to make sure, as I said before, that we can provide housing for those who come here. We can provide adequate medical services. And these are fundamental, important things to be able to provide. The Trudeau government over the years has failed miserably in terms of housing. And so we're struggling with that right now. We can't bring people here if we don't have anywhere to house them. And so that's something to be underscored in this debate, is that yes, we need immigrants, yes, we need temporary foreign workers, but we are a society that right now can't sustain them in terms of their ability to be housed, in terms of their ability to be served essential services. And so we have to work on that. And once we work on that and resolve that issue, then of course we need to open our doors to those who want to make a contribution. You know, for years and years, Roxham Road was allowed to be open, and the illegals crossed over that border and came here. A lot of those illegals did not work. They received welfare, and they lived off the system. And there were thousands and thousands that entered the country before the government finally closed the door. That is attributed to a large part of this problem. But for those who want to come here, play by the rules, pay their taxes, and work, then we need to welcome them. But we need to have adequate infrastructure in order to be able to service them as well.
I want to point out just a couple of stats here from this summer, okay? And that is the unemployment rate for young Canadians. And it basically hasn't been, it's at a level that it hasn't been in 15 plus years. Okay. I think it was for students who are returning to class in the fall, it was at 17%. For students who weren't going back in the fall, it was at 14%. So that's where I just want to say, you know, on the whole notion, well, we've got jobs and there's no one to fill them. It certainly seems like for someone who makes the argument, well, the reason why business wants these temporary foreign workers, it's to drive down wages. And when I look at the youth employment numbers, some of that rings true to me. What do you say to that? Keeping in mind that we have numbers of youth unemployment we haven't seen in a long time, that perhaps there are workers out there, but they don't want to work at perhaps low wages.
Well, I say to those, get off your butt and start working. You know, the reality is that there's a test that's done to see if there's a Canadian or a Quebecer who's available to fill a position. And for those students who are out of work, well, it's time to make an application. I'm sure you did that during your summers. I did that during my summers. And we filled jobs that perhaps we didn't desire that much, and that wages perhaps were not as high as we liked. But notwithstanding, we had a work ethic. And I commend those who were sitting on their butts at home, sorry for the crude word, but to get off their butt and start working.
But they're looking for, like, if you're in...
And if they're not prepared to do so, then the temporary foreign worker is prepared to do so.
Sure, but I'm just, if you're being counted, right, in the unemployment rate, that means you're actively looking for a job and can't get one. So that's just what I wonder, if there could be a correlation between that very high number of youth unemployment and access to cheap foreign labor.
Well, as I said, there's a test that's done for those who apply for the jobs that are posted. These jobs need to be posted for 30 days before they're approved for a labor market impact assessment. There's every opportunity to apply.
Could there be a gaming of that system, you know, that labor market impact assessment? Do you think at times, whether it's the person who's doing the checking or the businesses are fudging things, and we need to be a little bit stricter?
There's always abuse in the immigration system. Believe me, I served for it long enough to know that there's abuse, and we have to crack down wherever we see it. But overall, it works. And as you're hearing from the Montreal Chamber of Commerce, business groups across the country, they're alarmed by this measure because they understand that we have severe work shortages. And if we want our economy to grow and business to prosper and this country to prosper, then we need workers here. It's a no-brainer. This is not that complicated. Now, if Mr. Legault is going to be obsessed with protecting the French language, as he is always every single day of his mandate, then he's not looking at protecting our economy. And that should come first and foremost. That's the message I have for him and his government today.
Neil, it's always a pleasure chatting. We'll catch you on the Big Five real soon.
Good to be with you, Elias.
Neil Drabkin served as a senior policy advisor to a former federal minister of immigration.